Welcome all to the Food Safety and Quality Summit. This is a dialogue on the role of food safety and quality standards in sustainable food systems. This summit is a pre-summit dialogue of the UN's Food System Summit, which was scheduled for September as part of the decade of action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, that is the SDGs, by 2030. So the UN Food System Summit will serve as a turning point in the world's journey to achieve all the SDGs. And we can all agree, just as much as scientists do, that transforming our food systems is actually among the most powerful ways to change course and realize the vision of the 2030 agenda. So let's start off with a not so fun fact. Did you know 1 in 10 people do not have enough to eat, and 3 billion cannot even afford a healthy diet? Well, now you know. So let's go back to what this means for us. This Food Safety and Quality Summit will focus on Action Track 1 of the UN, which works to end hunger and all forms of malnutrition and reduce the incidence of non-communicable disease, hence enabling all people to be nourished and healthy. This goal requires that all people always have access to enough, affordable, and safe food products. Achieving this goal also means that we have to increase the availability of nutritious food, making food more affordable and reducing inequalities in access to food. That's why we are privileged today, and we have on board a very resourceful group of discussants, and hopefully all the other stakeholders that are present here can be able to contribute so that we can consolidate on various initiatives and chart a strategic, collaborative, multi-stakeholder action plan. So I'm just going to go through the list of some of the discussants that we have before we go on. Dr. Edewa Andrew from TradeMark East Africa will be giving the keynote. We'll also be having Joshua Oluyali, the head of Horticulture, Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, and Cooperatives. Among the other discussants will be Charles Opio, the Advocacy Manager at Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. We'll also be having Josephat Kariuki from the Food and Agriculture Organization. We'll have on board Alice Kemunto, the Executive Director, Grassroots, Consumer Grassroots Association, We'll also have Wambui Mbarire, who is the CEO, Retail Trade of Kenya, or RETRAC. We'll have on board lastly Lydia Kimani, who is the Executive Director, Agribusiness for African Markets. To spearhead this conversation, or to moderate rather the discussion, will be Nekesa Wafula and Dr. Samuel Were, who will be joining us a little bit later on as we go on. So from the attendance list, and also from what you can actually see the people who've registered, we have a quality and dynamic audience from government agencies to consulting companies, educational institutions, manufacturing, the hospitality, travel, and tourism sector. We have the media, amongst others, and we'll be updating that as the summit goes on. This pre-summit dialogue will identify points of convergence and build on the gains made through efforts by the public sector, the private sector, consumers, and development partners in Kenya to sustainably build food safety and quality into local, regional, and global food systems. It is crucial that we actually have this because it will also inform into the policy and practice engagement, and most importantly, provide all stakeholders a rallying point on the issue of quality standards as a cost-effective and consumer-driven approach to achieving food and nutrition security for all. So as you open this forum for dialogue, one alluring fact is that food system, and especially our food system, is still broken. Glad that this has just been preceded by the World Food Safety Forum that happened in June. And we can all agree that from the reports, cases of aflatoxins in maize, farmers using unlicensed pesticides, metal residues during production, there is a lot to be done. We cannot also ignore the fact that there's a lot that has been happening as far as improving food systems is concerned, and we'll be able to hear from the discussants on that. So this is definitely an opportunity to elevate and deliver on the systematic challenges facing the production, transformation, which is ideally processing, transportation, storage, and also the consumption of food. So by the end of this discussion, I hope that we will have answered some 3 questions that we have here. What are the gaps in having a sustainable food system in Kenya? How can we work better with other stakeholders to actually have a sustainable food system? And what is holding us back? Let's use the chat box for any questions and also any contributions. I'm sure they'll be read as the summit also goes so that they can add to the total contribution of this summit. As I finish, I'd like to acknowledge the organizing partners of this summit: TradeMark East Africa, SOCAR, RETRAC, Consumer Grassroots Association, and the government of Kenya. Not forgetting ASNET. If I will forget that, that will be bad on my end. All right. We shall operate in observance of the Food System Summit principles of engagement to act with urgency, commit to the summit, be respectful, recognize complexity, embrace multi-stakeholder inclusivity, complement the work of others, and build trust. The working language for this meeting will be English, and I hope that as we go on, we can be bold enough to discuss these issues as they are. So to start us off, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, the Director of Standards and SPS Measures from TradeMark East Africa, Dr. Andrew Edewa. Karibu.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Edewa. I hope you can see me from where you are.
We can see you.
Good. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to give this keynote address. My name is Andrew Edewa. I work with TradeMark East Africa as Director in charge of standards and sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Today, allow me speak briefly about the role of standards, food standards in ensuring sustainable food systems. I would like to share my screen. So I will speak briefly about the role of food standards in ensuring sustainable food systems. My name is Andrew Edewa, and I work with TradeMark East Africa, and I'm responsible for standards and the SPS measures as they apply to trade in the region. TradeMark East Africa is a trade facilitation organization, and our objective is to grow prosperity through trade for countries in the region. That is to say that we support trade in goods and services across East, the Southern, and the Horn of Africa countries. And in this, we do by supporting systems of government, but also working with the private sector directly in ensuring that the systems that they need for their trade are implemented, and also facilitate and remove barriers where they do exist, and more particularly to improve on the competitiveness of enterprises. One of the areas of trade in the region, in the African continent, is largely on food. And this food, for it to be traded, it means that then that it must first have met the domestic food security requirements, or you are importing it for the purposes of enhancing food security. Now, in this regard, food standards then play a big role because they have to facilitate this role. And that's where we come in strongly, not just ensuring that food standards improve trade or facilitate trade, but also working on the supply side to ensure that the production systems themselves are sustainable. To begin with, put the things in context, a sustainable food system is a system that delivers food security and nutrition. So it means that people have access to food, and this food will be available and provides the nutrition. And a country that's not able to feed its population is at risk of political instability and many other aspects following that aspect of lack of food for the citizens. The constitutional right of many citizens in many countries is that they have access to food. And the governments have the responsibility to provide food security to their populations, but ensure that this is done in a more sustainable manner. Now, food safety and quality then has implication on this food security and nutrition. The real implication here is that if food is unsafe or if food is of bad quality, then it will not attend to the nutrition aspects of the country. And if the food is unsafe, then it's going to compromise the health and safety of the same population which we intend to feed. Assuring food safety and quality standards will also promote sustainable food safety systems. That is, if we assure the public of food safety through standards and the quality through standards, then you assure that the nutritional components of food are improved through quality foods, but also the safety aspect of it, that the food will not be compromised and therefore become a threat to the populations that feed on it. Therefore, by looking at the proper food safety and quality standards, we are able to minimize food losses and the waste that may occur due to rejections of bad food. We are able to ensure that the public accesses food of high quality, which means has the right nutritional components in it, and the same food can be used for trade. And when we protect the consumers also from safety aspects, means that we are not supplying food that again causes diseases, foodborne diseases. So all these elements need to work together in a food system. So speaking more about safe food, it is important for us to get the perceptions clearly. That the term safe food represents different ideas to different audiences. While we are in this forum, the different audiences may perceive food safety in different manner. Consumers and especially interest groups, the regulators, the industry, academia, will all have their definitions of what food safety should be and what the quality of food should be. But much of this information, which is supposed to go to the public, goes to the public through the media, which then also brings in a lot of importance of the media and proper communication about food safety and quality to the public. And for this reason, therefore, the media perspectives on safety and quality of food supply influence the needs to understand, not necessarily scientifically, but the implications of the key messages that need to go to the public, whether we are causing food scares or we are causing food assurance, whether we are assuring food safety or we are actually causing food scares. And this alone determines how the public will have to perceive food and whether we shall be food secure and the public will enjoy the nutrition aspect of the food itself. But in general terms, just put us on one page, is that food safety is a positive concept. It's positive and not negative. Positive in the sense that it's about assuring the public that whatever food is supplied, produced and supplied, is safe for consumption, and therefore to guarantee their food security needs and nutrition as it goes to their tables. At the same time, this positive assurance means that we have to demonstrate, we have to show that things that are a threat to the quality of food, a threat to the safety of food itself have been addressed. Many of the threats in food are called food hazards, and these hazards they compromise the safety of food, and in many cases also the quality of the same food. Now, food therefore become potentially unsafe if it contains physical, chemical, or biological hazards in it. And in terms of assurance, it's about then what has been done throughout the food system in production, in supply, and in trade of food to ensure that any threats in the food, threats to the safety of the food itself have been addressed and therefore the consumers are assured clearly of the safety of the food. Traders are also reluctant to buy food which they are not sure about because it will be rejected. They are in the business, and since they are in the business, then they will not want to get to a situation whereby they lose due to not meeting the food safety requirements. In terms of food quality, many standards have been set also, defining the physical and the elements that the food itself must contain for it to be nutritious and useful to the population. This also is key. Now, these elements are all covered under food standards. Now, if I just move to the next level, therefore, why standards therefore become important is that these standards permeate all food business activities. So all those people participating in food business, or even the people who are on the street who may want to buy street vendor foods, where there are people on the farm, standards will play a big role in the primary production, in the manufacturing, and in the service industries of food. Food standards will become very necessary in the sale of the food itself in the national and international markets, without which it becomes very difficult for us to produce in accordance with the market requirements. Therefore, if we are talking about a sustainable food system and it meets the food security needs, then we must also be able to trade in it to allow for imports if the food security situation in the country is not good enough. We can import from our neighbors, but without standards, it becomes very difficult for us to do international business. Standards themselves help industries to cut down and improve on the productive efficiency. So in the agribusiness context, if you have to produce it in a more efficient manner, then food standards have played a big role in enterprise development. If you're implementing a food safety system in a food production plant, then this system must guarantee that the raw materials, the supplies coming from the farms, meet the necessary standards. And these standards could either be codes of practice, or it could be processes in which the food needs to be produced. Different processes at the farm level, including crop protection practices, spraying with chemicals, fertilizers use, and some of which may be of poor quality, irrigation, perhaps with the unsafe water. All this will have an impact on the raw material that goes into food production itself. And so, most importantly, it's good that we have standards, codes of practice that will work on the supply side to assist primary producers produce food in accordance to the requirements that will meet safety and quality aspects and guarantee a sustainable food system. Standards will have to enable also enterprises themselves to maintain their inventories of various ingredients, various inputs that may come into their processes. If the businesses are not economically sustainable, then they will not be profitable, and so they will not sustain the whole food system. Without farmers being guaranteed of a market for their products or of the off-takers of what comes from the farm, they will not continue producing in excess of what they are able to produce at that particular time. Markets also assist in making sure that where there are no preservation facilities at the farm level, that markets are able to take this product, is sold somewhere else, and you are able to buy this again at the time when you need it. So if businesses are not operating efficiently and therefore making profit, then it compromises the sustainability of the whole system. Standards also are a language for that if this is the language for trade, the producers and the buyers must understand the same thing. So whatever the producers are able to comply with is what the buyers will demand. And whatever the buyers demand is what the producers will have to work hard to ensure it's assured when they're producing their food. Now, standards are also important, especially in terms of preventing conflicts at the marketplace or rejections. If buyers are aware of or they understand the information about the food, then there will be no much problems about the food itself in the marketplace. A foreign buyer who knows and understands the standard for which the food has been produced will always have confidence in it. Therefore, standards help a lot in reducing the disputes over any specifications that may occur or limits of specific contaminants in the food to allow for trade to take place. Standards themselves are used by governments also to promote social goals. These social goals may include the protection of health. Imagine supplying food which then causes foodborne illnesses to the population, producing grain that is highly contaminated with the mycotoxins. This will be a problem in terms of cancer issues, or fruits and vegetables that have pesticide residues in them. This will not be safe food and cannot be good for the populations. Or it could be microorganisms that may be present in most of the food of animal origin and food of plant origin. Now, nobody wants to consume food that's going to lead them to the hospital bed. And therefore, government have a responsibility therefore to set their regulations based on these food standards. These standards are called the regulatory standards. They set limits of various hazards in the food to ensure that this food is safe and this food is of good quality. They are called regulatory standards. And such regulations may cover both the product characteristics and the materials and processes that are used to produce them. And compliance with the government measures or regulations is mandatory. And therefore, in all these aspects, we are encouraging governments that whenever they set their food safety regulations, they should base this on food standards. Whenever they set their food regulation, they should base this on quality standards as well. So this is the role of standards, as you can see. It plays a big role in ensuring that there's a sustainable food system that supplies safe and quality product. But then there's the bad side of it. While standards facilitate trade and also protect health and safety, they can also become a serious problem in terms of becoming barriers to trade. This is especially if they differ from country to country. You can imagine that you may meet local standards, but when you export it to the neighboring country, you cannot trade because they have different standards. And also for the imports, if you're importing food to cover for the food security gaps that we have in the country, and you cannot get the food onto your territory because of variable standards, it's a problem. A good example here is the recent case of in Tanzania and Uganda who are exporting maize into Kenya. The fact that the mycotoxins were present in maize, the limits in maize would be different under codex for which all of the member countries of ESA belong to, which is 20 parts per billion. But the local standards within Kenya require that maize, aflatoxins in maize should be 10 parts per billion. In this case, therefore, it was not possible that a grain from Uganda or Tanzania be admitted into Kenyan market. Now, this already itself eliminates a good volume of maize or of the product from the market. Science is really required in this case to ensure that the safety limits are set at a point whereby they will not restrict trade. So these standards, therefore, are a means or a tool in which these risk mitigation measures are implemented to ensure that the proper limits are set in the standards so that once implemented, the public is safeguarded. And so just to finalize this, why it's really important and why countries really have got to emphasize on this is that a single source of contamination in one country could get into another country within 24 hours of travel. And a serious foodborne illness could spread over the world because of food itself. Therefore, without standards, it becomes a big problem because we'll be spreading diseases. Several new sources of foodborne illnesses are of increasing relevance to the international trade right now. And as the international standards continue being developed, countries also must upgrade their systems through upgrading their national standards on food safety and quality. This will ensure that we respond to the trends in the world today. The trends are that in the recent years, a lot of emphasis on food is on food safety more than food quality. This means that the concern of many countries that they should import food that meets their safety standards, but also that the environment and social aspects have been addressed effectively. Therefore, food safety standards have been developed to address various risks along the value chain itself, but at the same time to ensure that the population, the social and the environmental aspects have been addressed. As I come towards the end of it, just to give a few examples of the key issues on the various value chains. One is that in fresh fruits and vegetables now, there are health concerns over potential hazards that may emanate either from production practices or the environment. Now, this means that we must have standards that ensure proper production practices are implemented, good course of practice in each country to ensure that this is done, and also to ensure there's protection of the environment. And social inclusiveness, that is, that as we implement these standards, they should not exclude smaller actors due to the cost of compliance to these standards. For cereals, for oilseeds, for animal feeds, there are also growing international concerns about the risks around the mycotoxins, the risk around the various other contaminants which could come in through genetically modified organisms. So a lot of work has been done in cereals, in pulses, in animal feeds, and many countries are now worried about GMO material, which might then get into their countries. So restrictions are there. And so we must ensure that our standards clearly define the risks mitigation measures, but do not restrict trade in itself. International trade also in spices and nuts has become a serious problem, mostly also food additives, like the colorings that are done to improve the various flavors in many of the countries which are trading in this commodity. Lastly, when it comes to fish and fishery products, the East Africa region has clearly the experience of a long-standing food safety issues with the EU in the 1990s, where there was a total ban of fish exports from Lake Victoria region. This affected Tanzania, it affected Kenya and Uganda. This ban was lifted because of reference to food standards. The WHO, in response to the Tanzania's question why the EU was maintaining these measures when they had implemented food safety standards, the WHO gave assurance to the whole world that by implementing the necessary HACCP, HACCP requirement, food safety requirements, it was possible that the risk of cholera and other foodborne diseases was mitigated, and therefore there was no need to continue to maintain this in trade. Therefore, as I conclude, you can see how standards were used as a way of also lifting this ban. So, as we come to the end of this, I just want to say that one last opportunity that does exist for us is to see that we address these issues using the whole chain approach. This food chain approach is the food systems approach that looks at recognizing that the responsibility for the supply of food that is safe and healthy and nutritious is shared among many stakeholders. Every stakeholder has a role to play. Government has a role to play. Food business operators have a role to play. Primary producers have a role to play, and the markets have a role to play. The creation of a systematic, comprehensive system that covers all food commodities, all sectors, and ensuring that the food standards are implemented at each stage of the value chain, of the food supply chain, helps a lot in ensuring that food standards assure food security and therefore sustainable food systems. This calls for active involvement of stakeholders, forums like this ones here, and to discuss good practices in production, good practices in manufacturing or processing, good practices across the whole food supply chain, including traceability and including risk analysis. Just make sure that we are on top of things. This one requires that, therefore, we have to shift our thinking from the old system of control to the new system, where we should regulate food from farm to the table. There should not have any rules on hygiene. Hygiene must be everywhere, and there should be facilities to ensure that food is produced and supplied in a safe manner. Food and feed business operators must have a documented and quality assurance system based on HACCP. Competent authorities, governmental agencies that deal with food matters must have a documented quality assurance system based on risk and efficiency, but not continue using the old laws that are deficient. They should be risk-based. They should focus on quality assurance systems rather than going to block food from being in the marketplace or from being produced. A shift must be there, therefore, from controlling of food to controlling of food business operators, knowing that it's the food business operators who operate with the food, and the government does not understand the nitty-gritties about how food was produced or supplied. Therefore, government just needs to control the operators by providing them with guidelines and rules they should follow, and then they should carry out audits to see that it's done. Risk assessment and risk-based control needs to be at the center of all matters about food systems, and the control of importers rather than imports. We should control importers themselves and not the imports. Check the importers and make sure they understand what they're importing and they follow the rules. And lastly, we need to implement traceability and transparency systems that ensure that the consumers and all actors are assured of the food that they receive and consume. Food standards, both for quality and for safety, ensure sustainable food production and supply, and therefore sustainable food systems. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andre Dewa, for that keynote. I missed the better part of the presentation, technical issues, but I came in right at the end. And my highlight for your presentation was responsibility for the supply of food that is safe, healthy, and nutritious is shared along the entire food chain. And that ideally means bringing stakeholders on board. I think it's very important that we've had such a strong start, because this will form the basis for the next discussion that we are going to have. So thank you very much. And I hope that you can stick on, because right at the end, we'll also be having a number of questions. We'll open the floor for question and answer. And in case anyone has any question to ask you, they can actually be able to do that. For the rest of the participants, I'd like to urge you to keep the chat box active in case you have any questions, in case you have any comments. It will be good to hear from you. But be informed that we'll be having a Q&A right at the end, so you can also be heard and your contribution can be taken in. Speaking of stakeholders, this next session that we are going to is as important as it gets, because it has brought on board a number of stakeholders, as I had shared in the beginning of this summit. And I'm going to introduce the moderators who are going to take us through this discussion along with their discussants. They can be able to probably introduce them afterwards. We have two moderators for this session. Our first moderator is Ms. Nekesa Wafula, who is a business development manager, B2B smallholder value chains at the Crop Nutrition Laboratory Services. Ms. Wafula is a skilled agriculture expert with extensive knowledge in project management, agricultural energy, various forms of fertilizer, production, marketing, application, regimes, and policies. We also have on board Dr. Samuel Were, who is an agronomist and lecturer at the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. Dr. Were is passionate about sustainable crop production, leading to guaranteed food safety to the consumers and increased productivity for the producers. Well, I'll hand over this session officially to Dr. Samuel Were, who will take us through the first session of with the discussants. Welcome, Dr. Were.
All right, thank you very much, Sheila. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for a wonderful keynote, Dr. Edewa, to start us off on this wonderful topic on food safety. Today, we have a number of panelists with us. We have Mr. Joshua Oluwale from the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, and Fisheries. We also have Dr. Andrew Dewa, who has just given us a delivered keynote address. He's the Director of Standards, TIMEA, TradeMark East Africa, for those who are just joining us. With us also, we have Ms. Agatha Thuo, who's the GM for ASNET, Agriculture Sector Network. We also have with us Ms. Wamboi Mbarire, who's the CEO of RETRAC. Also with us today, we have Ms. Alice Kemunto, who's the Executive Director for Consumer Grassroots Federation. And also gain from power. And I would like just to give them a minute to introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Mr. Joshua Oluwale, kindly.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Were, and thank you, Sheila, and of course, Dr. Edewa, for your presentation. Yes, my name is Joshua Oluwale. As I said earlier, I'm the head of horticulture. I work with the State Department for Crop Development and Agriculture Research. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. Yes, I'm through, Were.
All right, thanks, Joshua. Dr. Edewa, you've already given us a keynote. We appreciate that. Maybe you could briefly tell us what your main roles at TradeMark East Africa are as the Director of Standards, kindly. Dr. Edewa? Dr. Edewa with us? All right, we'll give Dr. Edewa some time to be able to speak to us again. Maybe at the moment we shall be able just to ask Ms. Agatha Thuo from ASNET GM also to introduce and really handle currently. Thank you, Ms. Agatha.
Hello and good morning. Can you hear me?
Hello, do we have? Good morning, Agatha. Go ahead.
I've put on my video, but apparently I don't see myself. My name is Agatha Thuo, and I'm the General Manager, ASNET. ASNET is the umbrella body for private sector actors in agriculture that was constituted in the year 2020, 1.5 years old, but it brings together all the private sector actors so that together we consolidate our efforts in the transformation of the agriculture sector. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Edewa, for that very good presentation. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Great, thanks, Agatha. Thank you so much. Ms. Wamboi, maybe you could introduce us, introduce yourself, and also let people know what ReTrack is all about and what ReTrack does currently. Welcome, Wamboi.
Thank you very much, Sam. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wamboi Mbarire. I'm the Chief Executive at the Retail Trade Association of Kenya. This is an association that brings together retailers of all sectors. Key to the food safety conversation would be the supermarkets and the food eateries who form part of the membership. We are currently actually having three projects that have to do with food safety. We are working with the Rockefeller on the implementation of 1758, Care 1758, both in the formal and informal sector. We are also doing a meat project. We are also doing a meat project with Kenya Market Trust to enhance the security and safety and quality of meat, again, still from farm to fork. And we are also being supported by COLSAP on aspects of the 1758 implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wamboi. Good to hear that we have retailers on board. And when you're talking food safety, it's very important to have the same. Now we come to Ms. Alice Kemunto from Consumer Grassroots. Please, Alice, you could introduce yourself, kindly. We have Alice.
Good morning. My name is Alice Kemunto. Sorry, I cannot be able to put on my the video on because of where I am. I was actually told late when I had already traveled up country. I'm the Executive Director, Consumer Grassroots Association, and I'm glad to be part of this great team. I can see my friend Wamboi, ReTrack, we work together in other areas. And on matters of food safety, food sustainability, food systems, we are very keen to ensure that consumers know what they consume, but not only that they can also drive this agenda, because what concerns them, what's not safe affects them, and what is in the market concerns them. And many times, for the longest period, consumers have not been involved in the discussions. Consumers have been left out in such forums, but we are glad that all is not lost. Here we are, and we believe that we're going to make things right. Together, we work as a team, because there's no one that is supposed to be left out in this conversation. And going forward, we hope for more engagement. As Consumer Grassroots Association, we carried out a survey on food safety that we launched last week, part 1, from a consumer perspective. Many times people say that consumers don't care about what they eat, but that survey proved all those theories wrong, and consumers are really careful. They are worried about what they are consuming. And matters food safety regarding the kind of markets that we have in the country, the kind of regulations that we have, whether consumers know whether there are regulations that are really protecting them at the county level, that is. Talking about the farm input, do they know the kind of farm input that is being used? All those things we did in the report, and the report is out, the survey is out, and we can proudly say that consumers are very keen on what they are putting on the plate, and that they would really want to be part of this conversation. And going forward, we want this voice of a consumer to be amplified, because once consumers know what they want, they will push for farmers to produce the best. They will push for retailers to sell the best, and they will push for government to enact laws that will protect them. This is our goal. This is our purpose, and this is the path that you want to take. So going forward, I believe we'll get more engagements as these ones. This we were informed late, and we'll prepare well for the rest of the team. But I want to encourage all of us, kindly work with Consumer Grassroots Association, because we mean well for consumers and in terms of food security and food sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alice, for the good job you're also doing. Already we are putting in place some of the issues we are looking at discussing today. Great. We would like also to appreciate Mr. Charles Opio from GAIN, kindly, who's the head of policy at GAIN, that is Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. Maybe, Mr. Opio, you can be able to bring us up to speed on what GAIN actually undertakes, even in relation to food safety.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samuel. I hope you can hear me very well.
Yes,
can you hear me? Oh, great, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Charles Opio, as you've heard. I work for Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, in charge of advocacy and policy. Basically, I know many of us perhaps have interacted with the GAIN, but really just to highlight what we do, that we are an international NGO. Of course, we have a couple of country programs cutting across Africa, Asia. Basically, we work very closely with the private sector, which of course now forms a bigger chunk of what we do. We basically also work with governments and also with communities in terms of demand creation and just ensuring that the discussion around nutrition within the food systems is something that is very much sustained. So in Kenya, we've been here for quite some time, but basically you will notice that we've been really involved in a number of food systems discussions, issues of nutrition, looking at issues on food safety. And of course, at the same time, we are also hosting the Scaling Up Nutrition Business Network, which is part of the global movement under Scaling Up Nutrition. So basically, I would say that when it comes to issues of food safety, as you've heard, it's at the core of what we are currently doing, both in our work with the small and medium enterprise businesses, and also at the same time looking at now the wet markets, which now is our current frontier in terms of just elevating the discourse into that particular space. So I'm glad to join you, and hopefully I'm sure we'll be able to really, put a few things into perspective to ensure that issues of food safety, it's very key. And finally, as we all also aware, there are currently the discussions around the UN food systems. We have the 5 action tracks, and one action track, one is globally also being led by GAIN, and that is access to safe and nutritious food for all. That looks at 3 things: that issues on nutrition, issues of addressing hunger, and of course food safety. And that's why, as I've said, it's very key for us to be part of this particular discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Pleasure. Thank you for a wonderful introduction about GAIN, looking at upscaling even nutrition. And we have been able to, in the keynote, we were being reminded that as much as we're looking at the whole chain of food systems, this one will entail issues of food safety and other standards that relate even to the food systems, and to ensure that we have enough food and safe nutrition and good for the consumer. Would like to bring on board also Lydia Kimani, that she may introduce herself. Miss Lydia, probably could speak to us on what the Green Climate Fund entails and what it is you do in relation to the food systems.
Thank you very much, Dr. Were. My name is Lydia Kimani. I'm the Executive Director for the Agribusiness for African Markets, which is a social enterprise that works to build globally competitive enterprises for women and youth, and specifically focusing on the areas of climate change, trade, and agriculture. And in addition to that, we also are very keen on ensuring that trade and investment policies work to the benefit of the entire sector, but more specifically to these marginalized groups. Aside from that, I'm a member of SOCA and represent SOCA in various forums, among them the Climate Smart Agriculture multi-stakeholder platform, which I think is where Dr. Were is referencing the Green Climate Fund. I also represent SOCA at the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance as the co-convener of climate finance. So we are very keen on just ensuring that the smallholder farmers are able to leverage on the emerging sources of finance, such as climate finance, like the Green Climate Fund, to ensure that we are able to roll out sustainable food systems. And this includes the adoption of standards, which can be quite expensive, especially for smallholder farmers. And in the wake of the COVID pandemic that has eroded a lot of livelihoods, economic livelihoods of farmers. So we are looking to just how to focus on how can climate finance be mainstreamed for the adoption of standards and support farmers in continuing to access markets, and especially with the emphasis on greening supply chains. So I look forward to a fruitful engagement and also learning from everyone. Thank you, Dr. Were.
All right. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Lydia, for that introduction from Agribusiness for African Market. We now come to Mr. Josephat Mwiruri from Food and Agriculture Organization. It's not the least, but he's the one we would like also to introduce himself from the point of FAO. How do you undertake issues with food safety systems? Mr. Mwiruri. Is Mr. Josephat with us? All right, Josephat will join us a little later. I don't know if Dr. Edewa is back on. Dr. Edewa, could you be in? Yes, Dr. Edewa, maybe just we were doing the introductions. Thank you for a wonderful keynote address. You have set the pace very well for us, and just wanted to understand probably the Director of Standards, what you undertake at TradeMark East Africa in relation to the food systems in a brief while, because you've given us a good intro to it. Kindly.
Yeah, yes, my name is Andrew Dewa. I'm Director in charge of standards and SPS measures at TradeMark East Africa. What we do more specifically in this line here is a trade facilitation, working both on the demand and the supply side of trade to ensure that food in this regard can cross the region and can be exported by the region to other parts of the world without any problems. This we do by, on one hand, addressing barriers to trade, working more with the governments to implement systems of governance frameworks, both at the regional level and at the national level. These governance frameworks will be laws, regulations, focusing on capacity building of the institutions, in this case, food safety agencies. As I speak now, I'm in Naivasha with the Health and Agriculture Ministries of Kenya, working on the food safety bill. So that's our focus line. And on the private sector, working along the value chain to support the implementation of food safety systems. And this is for the purposes of consumer protection, but also most importantly, to facilitate trade. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I think we have a little bit of challenges with the internet and network, but we'll be able to continue. Thank you very, very much, all those our panelists for today. And maybe just to set us rolling, I would like to bring on board Mr. Joshua Liali and maybe just inquire, Joshua, which explicit policies and strategies are in place in Kenya that may produce sustainable food systems? Do we have any that are currently in Kenya? And if there are, which actions does the national government undertake to promote sustainable food systems, in particular by strengthening rural-urban linkages? Maybe it's a mouthful, but you can start with the explicit policies that we may be having.
Thank you very much, Dr. Were, for this opportunity. Yes, government, one of our main roles as government is to develop policies and develop strategies and, of course, regulations that govern food production and production of safe food. But also we need to look at adequate food that is can be able to feed the population. So we already have the food and nutrition security policy, which was developed in 2021, 2020, and it's in operation. Our problem has been that we haven't really focused on implementation, but I think that would be the focus of my further discussion. Because I know that I've also participated in various forums discussing about food safety. And one of the things that I came to understand when I was talking to the many partners in food safety is that without a functioning a food system that starts from all the way from the farm, which includes acquisition of inputs and even the environment of production, to the markets, through the various transportation systems, storage, and finally to the consumers, no amount of regulations, no amount of standards will assure this country of safe food. So we still have so many gaps because we currently we have a lot of support. As government, we have seen there's a lot of our partners are supporting development of protocols, standards, regulations on food safety, like what Ade was just said. They are doing something on food policy, on food safety policy in Naivasha, which is fine. But I want to be very honest that if we do not invest in infrastructure that assures safe production of food and distribution, all this is not going to work. It has not worked and it's not going to work. So we need to make sure that we are also not working with selective food business operators. In Kenya, we have one big gap, which is we have been trying to address small-scale production. But I don't know whether we are really addressing anything in small-scale production in this country, because all of you will bear me witness that we are using the model called working with groups. And when I did a small assessment of the total number of farmers who are in groups, they are less than 10%. There is very little work we do with medium-scale farmers and large-scale farmers because we believe they have capacity to do these things on their own and do the right things. I don't know whether they have ever been trained on issues on safe production of food, which is of course found in various supermarkets and so on, and issues on how to maintain safe food. So we need to actually change that and see whether we can have capacity building for all producers so that we know we are talking from the same page. We also don't have what you can say. We don't have good infrastructure for quality and safe production. I'm happy that when Nekesa is here, we're full from coconuts, because when it comes to production, and if you're producing food in areas that are not really suitable for production of safe food, what can we do so that we ensure that even if it is a small-scale farmers producing or large-scale farmers producing, they are all producing in soils that are suitable for production of food that will be safe for human consumption. I've also had my colleague from again, Mr. Pio, is talking about wet markets. Seriously, as a country, do you have markets that we can say are selling safe food? Do we have the infrastructure, the markets? And this sector with so many partners and players and so on, these are the critical areas that we should be talking about. If we cannot be able to have even markets that are handling food safely in Nairobi, where we all live, and all of us, most of us in this committee, buy our foods. And we are the ones in charge of many of these programs. We are working with them. Then I think we need to do a lot better, all of us, so that we can be able to improve the supply chain of food to the consumers. Because right now, it is non-existent. It's a shame, but it is a truth, and we must own up this truth. So what are we doing as government to ensure that we are able to produce and distribute safe food? One of the things that I have been very keen to do, because of the issue about quality and standards, is to start looking at production from all the way from the farm coming to the market. So far, we have been able to come up with a model of bringing all the farmers, not small-scale farmers, all the farmers are producing certain commodities, all of them, including those with various forms of disability, all the value chain actors together. And we want to start piloting this very soon so that we as a country can also establish sustainable food production systems. So how do we do that? We must make sure we bring them together. So we have established some guidelines to do that, to bring together the farmers, let them have some, what you can say is a good, competent management team. We have already developed the training modules for those management team to manage production and marketing activities, so that they can be able, we can be in charge of in the production. But this will not happen, first of all, if we don't know the actors in the sector. And so we've made arrangements. We have already developed some data collection tools that can be able to capture the details of all the producers, all the transporters, all the processors, all the traders, all the service providers that are handling food, with the aim of having a practical traceability system and also being able to identify their capacity gaps in terms of quality and standards and safety of the food they're handling. So that when you are doing the capacity building, we know we are targeting on the gaps that they have. So That will be, of course, be accompanied by an effective management information system that will be capturing this data on real-time basis. So that if I transport food from point A to point B, I'll be able to enter that information in the system that I carried so many tons of cabbages from Nyandarua to Nairobi in this lorry, and this way I've delivered it. If there's any contamination, we know who transported that food, and therefore we can be able to trace it back if contamination occurred during any transport. So we are also trying to make sure that all these, as we had not put an element of food safety, awareness and practice in our tool. So we are now putting those, want to put those indicators on food safety awareness and practice in the tool, so that as we capture the other data about quantity, destination, the produce you're transporting, and the standards, we also capture the food safety indicators. This, we think, if we do that, because majority of our actors in the sector, and I mean the majority of the actors in the sector, they do not require the regulations we are setting up. They do not require the standards we are setting up. They do not require those protocols. What they require is capacity building. And they require the capacity and the infrastructure to use, because most of them want to do the right things. So the smaller number is what the regulation will be able to now help us manage and the various standards. So I think if we're able to do that, all of us as a country, we can have a sustainable, functioning food system, because in this, like I said, we are dealing with production and marketing. Like Dr. Dewa said, if the market for produce is assured and people know what to do, you don't even need to be there to tell them that make sure you produce the right food. Because if the market has told them what to produce, that is what they'll produce. So we need to spend more time and effort, ladies and gentlemen, in ensuring that we are establishing the functioning food systems, linking all the actors together, and ensuring that these actors are actually actively participating in also providing information continuously on standards, on safety, on quantities, and so on. And this way, we shall not be having meetings to discuss about food safety, but we shall be discussing meetings to discuss about increasing production, because our markets are expanding. I think in a nutshell, I can leave it there for any further indulgence by other members. Thank you, Dr. Were.
Thank you, Mr. Joshua. Thank you, Joshua, very much. At least you've brought us up to speed what the government is currently doing. We were expecting to be with Mr. Geoffrey Opio, or Geoffrey Odera, sorry, who's from the Ministry of Trade, but Joshua, you have tried to elaborate on issues about the growers, and you also put it clear about different stakeholders. What I would like you maybe just to think about as we are going forward is maybe, because these informal traders, much as we are talking about the farmers, the informal traders also play an important role in urban food systems, and especially for the urban poor. Probably you could just be thinking so that you can bring us up to speed on behalf of your trade counterpart on the national government support for these informal sectors, but we'll come to that at a later point. And maybe right now, as you're thinking about that, Joshua, maybe we can ask Ms. Agatha Thuo, or probably could you kindly just let us understand, because here we are looking at standards, there are voluntary standards, there are regulations you're looking at, and in food systems, we'd like to know how can we make standards work for the private sector? Because most of our producers, as Joshua has alleged, they're small smallholders, and most of them are actually private. We don't have much of public production. How do we make standards work for the private sector? Ms. Agatha Thuo, kindly.
Thank you, Chair. And once again, like I mentioned, my name is Agatha Thuo. I'm the General Manager for the Agriculture Sector Network, which was established just last year. But it's very, very important that the private sector is consolidated, because for a long time, private sector has worked distinctly, everyone doing their own things without much regulation. I want to say hello before I start to my friend Joshua, who has just talked, and the presentation that he has made is a very good presentation, and mentioned that before I joined the ASNET, I was working with the Ministry of Agriculture. So Joshua and I have worked for a long time together. And I joined the county government of Nyandarua as this county executive in charge of agriculture. But later, when I left the county government, I also teamed up with the colleagues to provide service in the environment of food safety, specifically among smallholder farmers, smallholder farmers at production level, and indeed across the entire value chain. So I want to thank the presenters that have come before me, particularly the keynote address that was made by Dr. Edewa, and what Joshua has also presented just now, the need for us to cut across the entire value chain in the process of mainstreaming food safety. Before I joined the ASNET, I said I worked with the smallholder institutions, specifically mainstreaming food safety. Those are private sector actors. And I also worked in the area of wet markets. Specifically, I was working with some two markets. One market, this Sokompia market, which is at the flyover, the Nyandarua County Sokompia market, which has come up very, very fast. It's a very huge market now, open air market. And there is another market, which is in Nakuru, the free area wet market. And I agree with Joshua that we have a lot of challenges in our wet markets in Kenya. In a wet market, you find there are toilets, and some of them are within the market infrastructure. And you also have a lot of food that the mix is really wanting. We have a lot of food safety issues in our wet markets, and I believe this is an area where we need to do a lot of interventions. And what we did, because the markets have market management committees, is to sit with the committees and the stakeholders, including the county government staff, and together identify what are the real challenges in food safety in those markets. And fortunately for us, we had some development partners who are willing to invest in make capital investments, particularly to circumvent some of the challenges in the markets, some of which included removing the ablution blocks and the toilet facilities from the market, the inside of the market, providing clean water, and even looking at the infrastructure, the market itself, areas that could need to be supported so that there is more improvement, including drainage issues. I think you have seen the Sokompia market. Most of the people have traveled along the Nakuru, Nairobi highway, and you can appreciate the challenges at the market. So the infrastructural investments, not yet, but recommendations have already been made. Now, coming to what the private sector can do to be able to enhance these standards, I think, ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of need. And I want to really commend the people that came up with the idea of consolidating the private sector under ASNET. I think there is a lot of need for private sector consolidation, working together, especially so that continually we can build capacity in the private sector. There is a lot of need, and I agree with Joshua, for capacity building across the board, including amongst a lot of our members in the private sector. And food safety, like the keynote speaker mentioned, is a value chain. It requires an entire value chain approach, right from farm input supply all the way to the consumption. And Chair, I want to bring on board a concept that I think some of our members are also, discussing, and I think it's just about time we agreed that the private sector also needs to self-regulate. Everyone that is dealing with food, including the producer, the transporter, the trader, and the traders need to appreciate that at every level, at every node of the value chain, they are food business operators. They are operating food business, and for us to be able to improve the economy, they have a stake. And therefore, and hence the need for the private sector actors to work together so that we self-regulate as a private sector, take responsibility for each other. A lot of times the food business operators in this country have relied on inspectors. And it's like they work because they are being inspected. But I think it's just about time that the private sector regulates itself, specifically having certain obligations that they must observe, one of which is safety. That every food business operator must be able to internalize food safety issues at their level, whether it is in a kiosk, whether it is in a kiosk, they must understand what are some of the challenges in a food business kiosk. And the other thing that they must do is take responsibility at that level. And I believe it's just about time now that everybody was allowed to take responsibility for what they are doing with regard to food safety. What I'm saying is, for example, some of the food safety issues are right down the counties, and hence the need for us to work together, including with the county governments, so that every food business operator in the country takes responsibility. The other thing that they must do, where it is applicable, is that every food business operator must have an obligation for traceability. As we speak today, we have so many, except in some of the counties where there is institutional capacity building and strengthening at the counties. In so many counties, this is not it. And I think together with the ministry, together with the organizations responsible, we must mainstream. We have a responsibility to mainstream traceability amongst the food business operators. And this is what Mr. Joshua Oluyari was speaking about, the need for capacity building at every level. We must identify, have a comprehensive database in every county of the organizations operating food businesses and work with them so that they understand the issues of traceability. The other thing that we must instill, and this one will come after a lot of capacity building and a demonstration of the need to do this, is that we must make them very transparent. Everybody should be transparent about the systems that they are using. Transparency is very important so that things are not done under the table. And our members, even the members of ASNET, and hence the need for us to really work together so that all the private sector actors are working under the same umbrella. The need for transparency, that this is what we are doing, this is where we are getting our produce from, these are our transporters, this is what they are observing, and all the way to the market. And I think, Chair, there is also a lot of need for the food business operators to take to make sure that they report emergencies. We've had a lot of cases which are not even reported by the institutions themselves. We have been reading in the newspapers that this is happening, and there is food poisoning in a certain area. I think every food business operator should take it upon themselves to act, withdraw, for example, food that they believe is not safe. But I'm saying this is not easy. It's something that must be impressed upon our people. And sometimes our people know, sometimes it's not capacity building, and hence the need for us to strengthen our institutions, including having food business operators registered. They must withdraw food that is not safe from the shelves. And then the need for cooperation as well is very, very important. They must cooperate with the regulators. The government is a regulator, and we have competent authorities that are also regulating food. Food business operators must work together with the government, together with all the regulators. I think this is very, very important. If we have to change the situation as it is in this country, if indeed we have to accelerate trade and agricultural transformation and food security in this country. And Chair, I think this is something that we can continue discussing so that we make sure that our controls are not firefighting, because a lot of times what we are doing as regulators, we are firefighting, but we should ensure that our controls in food safety are preventive, so that the inspectors, when they visit the food business operators, are not firefighting, but they are looking at the systems that a food business operator, have they been able to mainstream in their businesses food safety measures, including where they store their food, how it is kept. I think this is important. And we make it the sole responsibility of the food business operators to comply with all regulations. And most importantly, we must have them approved. This is not going to be easy, but if we have to ensure this, then we have to work. Both the levels of government must work together. The food business operators must be approved. As they do their businesses, they must also be registered within the counties where they are operating, so that inspection becomes a pillar. It becomes a facilitator. They are happy to meet with the inspectors instead of running away. And I think, Chair, we have a lot of work, but it's not impossible. It is something that we can be able to achieve with a lot of concerted effort at both the national government level and at the private sector level. And if you allow me, Chair, I'm going to stop there. But this is a discussion that I think we should continue having, so that we can all be able to push together, to move together ahead with a common. I think we need a roadmap that is clear for all of us in the private sector. And I want to submit at this point, Chair, so that I also allow other members to have some time to do their presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agatha, for wonderful insights and telling us about waiting for inspectors. We need to self-regulate. We're moving away from the stick and carrot for food safety systems and generally food systems as a whole. We're getting quite some good feedback from a lady called Lucy Mudoni on what Joshua, you had earlier spoken of, and for asking the hard questions. And she says she's currently working with small scale farmers from rural areas, and at the same time undertaking her doctoral research in smart agriculture. And she says that the gaps that you have actually highlighted and are actually true, and it builds credence to what her research is all about. And I think these are areas that we really need to look into, and even what Agatha you've brought up about the role, how to make standards work for the private sector. I don't know if Mr. Dewa is in now. We were supposed to have a gentleman from the Ministry of Health, and I wanted just to understand, as he has continued working with different groups in food safety and funding, if probably he could be able to highlight what the role these public actors have in enabling sustainable food systems, and how that department, from what he has done with them, they meet these requirements. If he's on board, maybe he can help us with that. Dr. Dewa? Is not on board. It is well. We will be able to move forward and come and look at, we have seen what the private sector can, how standards affect the private sector. It is important maybe also to ask Ms. Wambui, currently you've been doing quite a bit of work on ensuring that our retailers ensure the importance of food. And maybe we could come to you and kindly paint for us a picture how to make these standards work also for smallholders and small businesses with the experience you have with RETRAC. Please, Ms. Wambui. Hello, Ms. Wambui Mbarire? She on?
Sam, are you calling me?
Yes, Wambui, it's you I'm calling. I'm saying I would like you to bring us up to speed on how we can make these standards work for smallholders, knowing that there's quite a bit of work you are doing with the retailers right now. How do you see the standards, these voluntary standards work for smallholders and small businesses?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think I want to start by saying two things. One, I'm happy to hear Joshua talk about the traceability system. And I say that because a lot of times we have good, excellent systems. I think our challenge is always in the implementation. And I also say, Agatha said that we have had no regulation in the sector. And I would also want to disagree with that and say we've had regulation. We just have very poor implementation, especially in the domestic market. We have a lot of regulations that work very well for the export market, but those that were meant to be for the domestic market have just never been activated. If you think about the KS 1758 itself, it's a standard that is going to 6 years now. And really, 6 years later, we should have said the following has already been done. So for the implementation to be attempted now just simply goes to show that we, and people who have spoken to me from this sector know, I keep telling them, you focus so much on feeding your neighbor's children well, but forgot that your first call of action should be to your own children. So I'm also very happy to see Alice here because the conversation with food safety, like in countries in Europe, actually always comes with a push from the consumers. The consumers can demand, and if they demand, the retailers the farmers, everyone down the chain will have to take up that responsibility. So as an association, because of the challenges of the consumer sector in terms of, and I'm not referring to a common voice, in terms of many things, including the challenges of our pockets. And your words were, the informal sector serves the urban poor. Again, can I discredit that comment and say, no, a significant majority of urban dwellers actually shop in the informal sector where fruits and vegetables are concerned. I mean, just stand in a street, even in Nairobi, and you'll see who buys from the hawkers. It is, would be, in most cases, up to and including the middle income player, and even the informal markets, which are semi-formal, Kangemi, Gikomba. There's a lot of purchasing from the middle and lower income people. So how can we better impact the informal sector? I think one of the things that has come out as we work towards implementing 1758 is the importance of the farmer groups. We must start putting our farmers back together. I am educated a lot by people in this sector that farmers no longer like the word cooperatives. So I will not say we need to form farmer cooperatives, but I'll say we need to look for a way to put in farmers into groups, to bring back the important person called the extension officer, so that when you're doing things like 1758, you're able to impact a larger group. The costs of implementing any of these standards that we speak to can then be shared among a group, which makes it more practicable to implement. The other challenge I would say that we've seen is that as we go forth, how do we ensure that the basics of the standards are achieved? And can we, one of our deliverables in one of the projects we're doing is a review of the standard 1758. Somebody told me that on average, it will take you 6 hours to do a global gap audit, but it will take you 3 days to audit 1758. That already means global gap will be perhaps, KS17 will be perhaps 3 times more expensive to audit. Is that an expense the domestic farmer is going to be able to afford? Hence the importance of farmer groups. That is one. The second one would be, one of the challenges of retail, for example, is access to quality, sustainable supply, and variety. If we're able again to do farmer groups, it creates a route to market, because if I'm dealing with a farmer group, we know, for example, at no given time will there not be enough spinach, or will there not be enough tomatoes, because as a group, you're aggregating together your produce. And it's a better route to traceability than the current system that a lot of markets use, which is the use of quote unquote brokers. I know they have a new name nowadays, but yeah, quote unquote brokers. If we have a farmer group, a supermarket, for example, can contract through the farmer group. That way, you have access to a farmer, or the farmer has access to the society that allows his produce to meet set standards. If we have a problem with a particular batch of tomatoes, you're able to trace it back to the cooperative. Should then hopefully be able to trace it back to the farmer. But when we use our current systems, which is aggregator, also known as broker, what we have is, for example, if I'm doing sweet potatoes, you'll have a truck that moved from, let's say, Meru, through various Meru farms, collecting sacks of potatoes or sweet potatoes along the road, as we see, all the way to Nairobi. When, as a supermarket, I go to Kikombe and buy a sack of sweet potatoes, who knows which batch it is? Who knows in which farm in Meru did it come from, because including the driver himself or his turn boy, they simply throw in, I imagine, throw in the sack into the truck. I have not met anyone who told me there's a system to which those sacks are collected along the road. So we need to look at a way of grouping the farmer, and this for me is extremely key, so that one, he she is able to access the knowledge. Two, he's able to have a continuous market by being a member of that society. And two, we are able to guarantee a system certification of the produce that we're eating, because we're able to know where it's come from, how it's been transported, how it's been stored, how it's been received across the whole value chain. Again, we'll be able to do farm to fork. Then when we come into the market, and maybe this is a challenge now for trade, is how do we formalize those markets? How do we, even if it's a market like Ngara, how do we get everyone off the floor onto a stand? How do we work towards generating or ensuring that there is flowing water in those supermarkets? How do we manage the kiosks in our estates? How do we get the information to in our area we have Maasais? How do we get the knowledge to the Maasai that this water in which you're dipping all your spinach and then cutting for the people who insist on being cut, is there a safety element to it? And even now, to reach that consumer and find out, do you know the threat to your health in this? And then the general discussion, just having that conversation with the general public in relation to food safety, so that we can sensitize our people that one, the word is that safe is not necessarily expensive. We need to prove that. Two, that as we move, if I consume healthy now, my health bill tomorrow is lower. Show the benefits of safe food now. I keep saying in this our country, even the rich cannot afford our medical services. That is why they go abroad, because it's cheaper. So that conversation, we really must have that conversation from everywhere. And if the consumer jumps onto it and runs with it, not the retailer, not the farmer, not Joshua where he sits, will have a difficult job, because the demand will equate that particular supply. And that's why it's been successful in the countries that we export to. The consumer says, unless 1, 2, 3, 4 is ticked, we are not buying. So let's do the same for our locals. Thank you very much.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you, Omboy. Actually, it's coming up very clear. We need to bring our roles together to ensure issues on traceability and also the self-regulation that Agatha had initially spoken about. I think now we have Dr. Dewa. Maybe Dr. Dewa, in just 3 minutes, what you have worked together with the ministry, what could be the role? Because everything still is coming back, as much as we are looking at the public, the private sector, also the public sector has a role. What could be the role for public actors in enabling sustainable food system from the different works you've done with these people? And once Dr. Dewa, you handle this, maybe I will hand over to Nekesa that she may carry on with the same. Thank you. Dr. Dewa, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Okay,
Dr. Were. Can you hear
carry
me?
on. Carry on, carry on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a bit of unstable network because of the conference facility I'm using here in Russia. But I hope you can hear me clearly. Just confirm that so that I don't change the network. So with regard to your question about the role of the public sector, or is it public health authorities in this, let me talk about the public sector in general rather than just public health. Yes, the public sector has a key role to play. Remember from my presentation, I talked about a whole chain approach to food safety, and this requires that we have to look at end-to-end, a whole chain continuum, and this brings together, I said, all stakeholders, both along the food production chain itself. That's the various actors in the private, the value chain actors, or the food chain actors, the food business operators. But on the other hand, it is the institutions, the government agencies, the public sector. Now, one key role that we should see here is to ensure that the rules are available to operate. Can you hear me? I think I lost my network a bit. Hello?
We can hear you, Dr. Go on.
Okay, good. So it's about if there's a foodborne illness, the first thing is there has to be investigations. There has to be surveillance. There has to be investigation linking the foodborne disease illness to the value chain. There has to be a linkage. Otherwise, we'll be working on two separate platforms. The public sector is doing their own thing, and the private sector their own thing. So the new shift here we're talking about is to identify which food supply chains are we talking about. So if we're talking about dairy, for example, then the first thing is to identify all the issues in the dairy sector that may cause a foodborne illness or a food safety concern. And then work backwards to look at if there exists, number one, the legal framework for control of foodborne illnesses and hazards in the dairy sector. And then once we have got the laws and laws, then we're going to look at the enabling regulations that will assist in the enforcement of the various provisions of the act that will be will have been identified. The third area is look at a policy. That's a policy then that brings together different actors. They are all shared responsibility on who is supposed to do what in the same, because if there are various issues, some at the primary production level, for example, it's strange that you cannot bring somebody from the Ministry of Health to train farmers at the farm level on how to grow food away from sewage areas. That would be a different agency, maybe the county government. So there has to be a food control policy that then governs this. That's the role of the public sector. The other role of the public sector is to look at then how do you implement the policy? Who does the inspections? Without inspections, it's very difficult for you to ascertain that things are being done right. So that's a key role of the public sector. Another role that they play is carrying out surveillance, monitoring, and testing. So they may take samples, they may take for analysis, and this is for the sake of public interest. So this is another area. Then investing in the same equipment, say for testing, investing in labs, investing in monitoring systems, surveillance systems is the role of the public sector. Then the next one will be looking at how to approve exports and imports, or how to approve food that goes to the market, even at the local level. So everything that's placed at the marketplace must be assured to have been safe and of good quality that meets the consumer requirements, and therefore the relevant. Yes, again, the role of public sector is to ensure that we have got the relevant standards, the regulations, and the mechanisms for approving these products before they go to the market, to the consumers. So all put together, therefore, becomes a crucial role of the public sector, including convening other actors, all actors, in a coordination mechanism. Committees like one we have in Kenya, the Food Safety Coordinating Committee, this should be addressed by government. If it comes to trade, notifying other trading partners about the changing requirements, the changing needs of our domestic food safety system, that's the work of the public sector. and setting up what we call inquiry points where the private sector and other interested parties can go and gain information on food safety. That's key. And then lastly, there's something called a competent authority. When there's a risk or when it's danger, who is the final authority in terms of the issue? We had the cases of mercury in sugar, and we had different agencies speaking about whether there is or without mercury in sugar. The competent authority is supposed to be the final one that says whether there's any issue or not and communicates this. And this is also the role of the public sector. And they can also delegate this work to the private sector in terms of the regulations, enforcement, or even testing, inspection, certification. This can be delegated to the private sector. But the overall responsibility remains of the competent authority of the public sector. I think I've said this. I'll leave it there for now. There's quite a large scope, and I can speak the whole day about the role of the public sector. But obviously, the shift is now away from the laws to allowing the private sector do the implementation of the food safety systems, and the public sector only comes in to do audit, checks, and supporting the private sector in terms of doing their work in food safety management systems. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edewa, for the words that you've just shared. That's very good information. And I believe that this is key to the, to the route to market and what we are looking at in terms of the value chains and the market systems. So I'll just read a comment from Mercy Limbua. The key challenge in Kenya's food safety is implementation. There's need to address the gaps or the challenges that hinder effective implementation. And this will go a long way in changing the narrative in food safety in the local market. If we could localize the implementation of international standards to the local market, then in 5 years, we'll be able to see the change and safe food on our tables and shelves. That's a comment from Mercy Limbua. So we're going to go to our next guest speaker, and that is Lydia Kimani. Lydia Kimani, I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. And as you introduce yourself, please go ahead and let us know how can voluntary standards be used to enable green trade opportunities in agri-food products, not currently using the voluntary standards. Maybe that's the first question you can take us through as you introduce yourself and what you do, and then on to the question. Karibu, Lydia.
Thank you very much, Nekesa. My name is Lydia Kimani, like I mentioned earlier. I'm an agricultural economist, executive director, Agribusiness for African Markets, and a member of SOCA. And we represent SOCA in various committees that deal with issues of food safety. That's the National Technical Barriers to Trade at KEBS, the National Sanitary and Phytosanitary Committee, and also the National Codex Committee. So then in addition to that, we appreciate that the issue of food safety crosses mandates. So it's not just confined into the Ministry of Agriculture, but it has climate change aspects. So we have witnessed that the rise in temperature has also resulted in an increased incidence of pests and diseases, which is now making farmers to use more pesticides on the food, on the produce that they are delivering to the market. And that has also come with its fair share of challenges. So that is in a bit. And so to that extent, we've appreciated that to resolve the issues of food safety, we cannot only be confined in the space of agriculture, but we have also got to engage with the Trade Ministry, the Ministry of Environment, on issues of climate change, so that it is a concerted effort and we build synergies in terms of the interventions that are being undertaken. So to the issue at hand is in what ways can voluntary standards be used to address, to introduce to unlock green trade opportunities, and especially where they are non-existent. So I think to begin with, I'd like to first appreciate that and share that the challenge of implementing standards, and especially in a developing country context like Kenya, has been largely because of the informal nature of the economies. And this informal nature of economies can be traced back to the implementation of the structural adjustment programs of the World Bank and the IMF in the 1980s and the 1990s. So what happened during the SAP implementation is that there was the role of government was reduced. So at that point, we used to have government doing a lot of the marketing and had a strong hand even in the coordination of smallholder farmers. We had strong cooperative societies that addressed the issues of access to inputs, extension, marketing, building bargaining power. But then when it became a requirement to access IMF funding, so we had our farmers, and this is a situation that can be witnessed across many developing countries. So a lot of the farmers that had been sheltered under cooperative societies now were required to go to market, go into production as individuals. So at that point, it became very expensive, and that is a situation that has perpetuated to present day. So we find that also the issue of voluntary standards is mainly driven by consumers, discerning consumers, and in our case and in our context, in our export destination markets. So aside from these consumers being very well aware of what they are looking for in the market, they are also wealthy, and they're able to afford the premium prices that come with produce that complies to the standards. So if we are supposed to apply voluntary standards in a context where they are non-existent, for example, in Kenya, for our food, domestic food production, we will need to ask several questions. If we have a largely informal economy pegged at almost at 80%, it means that by extension, that we have a majority of Kenyans in the low income bracket. So, and from our keynote address this morning, Dr. Edewa alluded to the fact that implementation of standards, especially for smallholder farmers, comes at a premium price. So we will need to also find out, we will need to establish as we implement the standards, how are we going to ensure that they are not going to drive up the cost of produce, and also how do we make it affordable for the farmers who are implementing these standards. So we have a multiplicity, a challenge that compounds itself. And as if that is not enough, we are now going to be required to implement these standards in the context of COVID-19. So COVID-19 has resulted in eroding a lot of incomes for very large populations in the country. So we ask ourselves, for the numerous Kenyans who've lost their jobs, if we are indeed selling safe food, but it comes at a premium and they can barely even meet the requirements of a meal a day, how are we going to make safe food affordable? So these compounding issues then result in us getting to the point of we need a creative, innovative way to deploy voluntary standards to ensure that there is safe food, but also we have aspects and objectives that voluntary standards seek to achieve, such as social welfare. We need to promote good agricultural practices, and also just ensuring that consumers are not getting exorbitant prices for their food products. So to address some of these issues, I would like my thoughts are that we need to, like Wambui accurately mentioned, we need to organize our farmers into groups, and not just groups for the sake of it, but they need to be commercially oriented entities. And this is going to make it easy for our farmers, first of all, to enjoy the economies of scale in terms of affording the cost of adopting the standards, where the cost is shared among the farmers. Then in addition to that, it will improve and increase our opportunities for transformation, that is agro-processing and value addition, because standards help to introduce consistency in the quality that is coming into market. So by extension, even for those the other operators along the value chain who are engaged in value addition processes, it becomes much easier for them. Then standards also are very critical in ensuring that we are building climate change resilience. And in this, at this point, I'd like to put the context of KS 1758. So we realize it has 4 pillars. It has food safety, it has good agricultural practices. We have a social welfare pillar and an environment conservation pillar. So in the horticulture sector, as the operators adopt the code of practice KS 1758, they're not only meeting the aspects of food safety, but they're also building resilience. And for the agriculture sector, building resilience for climate change is very critical because the production is very is strongly hinged on the stability on good weather. So it is important that as we adopt these standards, we appreciate the multiple benefits that they bring on board. So in addition to this, we will find that our value chain actors and the food system in its entirety is able to deliver on the sustainable development goals. Because like I have mentioned with KS 1758, in context here, you realize that by just adopting KS 1758, you're able to achieve SDG 1 or no poverty, zero hunger, the access to water, climate action, life on water, life above, life on earth, life below water, and even on partnerships. But then you realize that again, in the context of developing countries, we have consumers who do not know. So we need to also complement this with aggressive sensitization. And again, this has been very evident in what KS 1758 is doing, because once the consumers are aware that it is their right to have safe food, that the government has already gone ahead and made provision for this, then they're able to create that demand. But then again, you realize that the private sector is not going to come in and do sensitization. Then again, we need to ensure that our public sector is in a position to ensure that this happens. Then we also find that a lot of the voluntary standards are they're commercially oriented. So in the presence of weak and fragmented market systems, which has been alluded to by all the other previous speakers, and especially in the informal economy, it becomes very challenging to deploy the voluntary standards to the benefit of food safety and all the other accruing benefits. So we will need to have a public-private partnership, like what we are seeing in the rollout of the KS 1758. And this is because this will, in the process, facilitate the development of the private sector. So the standards are going to be very instrumental in transitioning our largely informal economy to become more formalized. Because once we start having farmers now banding into groups that are commercially oriented, we start the process of formalization. If it is the transport and logistics, then they will also need to become more organized in terms of ensuring that the traceability system that is in place is functional. And then finally, we also need to build very strong synergies and ensure that there's policy coherence. And maybe to help us appreciate this is that, for example, we are now talking about food safety, but now the Ministry of Environment has embarked on launching a green growth and circular economy policy framework. So we need to understand, for us in the agriculture sector, even as the country moves towards green growth, which is where the green trade for us in agriculture sector is going to be unveiled. In what ways are we ensuring that the policies that are coming up in the Ministry of Environment complement the efforts that we are undertaking in the agriculture sector? In what ways are we leveraging on those kinds of initiatives to now ensure that we are introducing aspects like circularity, where waste in one value chain becomes the raw material in the other. Again, an aspect that KS 1758 is very keen on. So these are some of the benefits that voluntary standards are going to bring, but they will need a framework that is going to support them. So we have seen for the export market, the markets have driven it very well. So for us at the domestic level, we will need to coordinate and organize our market systems. We will need public-private partnerships to roll out so that we facilitate the transition to self-regulation, and the government eases out on continually regulating. The government steps in to regulate because there is no order and coordination among the private sector. And then we have a lot of sensitization and sensitization on the importance of standards. Then maybe finally what I'd like to just bring in is that the voluntary standards going forward are going to be very critical for the agriculture sector in terms of accessing sustainable finance. And sustainable finance in this context is going to look at going forward, there is a clamor for as in globally to move towards a green recovery post the pandemic. So this is going to require that going forward, enterprises who will seek funding, whether it is in grant, equity, or debt, they need to demonstrate in what ways are their activities or their enterprise activities demonstrating sustainability. Are they demonstrating energy efficiency, water use efficiency, good agricultural practices, minimal use of pesticides? And these are going to be reflected in the balance sheet in terms of climate-related financial disclosures, so that we are trying to make trade more predictable, but at the same time ensure that the natural resources that are scarce are also available for future generations. So going forward, it is important that farmers are not only educated on the benefit of standards, but in ways on the other additional benefits of enabling them to access sustainable finance. And I think that's where we bring in the conversation on the green climate funding. So traditional donors.
Lydia, maybe you hold on that thought on the green climate change fund, because I have a question for you, and probably before we get to that question, maybe this is a question for Mr. Joshua Oluyali regarding the markets. So in terms of the informal markets, what is being done to achieve sustainable and inclusive food systems? I know this could be probably responded to by any member, but specifically directed to Joshua Oluyali. Do we have him on the call?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Nekesa, for that question. As I said from the beginning, is that we all need to agree on one thing. And there's something I want to persuade the team. If we continue emphasizing on standards, whether voluntary, mandatory, protocols, regulations, and we do not have infrastructure in this country, market infrastructure, I am sure that we'll never get anywhere. We'll talk like this for the next 20 years. I said from the beginning, we are organizing farmers. We are still discussing that. But we are organizing small-scale farmers, large-scale farmers, medium-scale farmers, traders, processors, transporters, in a way that they can be able to work together. If we're able to bring the traders together, who are the retail traders and the farmers, so that there is a link between the traders and the farmers. And when you talk about capacity building, is that these traders will be trained on how to handle food in a safe way. And they are then linked with several partners or financial institutions to be able to improve their structures where they are selling the produce. That's what we mean by capacity building. So that when the consumer goes to buy food, he finds the food is put in the right place. There's no careless handling of food by consumers because it is protected away from consumers. You only point what you want to buy and you take it home. This is the information, this is the capacity building you're talking about. It's both skills and also infrastructure. So if traders are supported and the farmers know that these traders also require this food, these quantities they produce for them, the quality standards are known. Food safety is everyone's responsibility. We shall only have safe food when, like Womboy said, when every food business operator is able to handle the food in a safe way without being forced by anyone, voluntarily, because they know that it is more profitable to sell safe food. So I wanted just to emphasize that point so that we stop dwelling on this issue of things that we have been developing for the last many years and they're not helping us. I want to give a very classic example. If you want to know that these things you're talking about are not going to help us move this sector forward. Kenya has been producing very quality tea for many years, and to small-scale farmers producing. We didn't have these standards we're talking about. Why were they doing that? Simple. Tea was introduced in this country and it started from the nursery. Farmers were given quality seedlings. They were also open as sheds, collection sheds, and they were trained on harvesting quality tea. And then it was taken to a factory and processed. Let us do what we are supposed to do to ensure that we're able to achieve the quality standards. Let's put more effort in developing our value chains. Let's make sure that there is infrastructure that can help the smallholder farmer, the medium-scale farmer, and the large-scale farmer to be able to move the food from the farm to the consumers in a safe way. Yeah. That we shall be doing well. So, and also the traders that you're talking about, we are working closely with the Ministry of Trade for that reason, because we know that when food is produced by farmers, it has to be sold. So we want the traders also to be trained as they do the trading, so that they're able to handle the food safely and make sure that they're also making money. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joshua Oluyali, for your comments. And you've brought in a very interesting dynamic about the responsibility to ensure market infrastructure. I will ask you maybe later to just tell us how there's who is actually responsible for this. But let's go to Charles Opio. Charles is from GAIN. That's the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. Out of the studies that you carry out, and even from your own experience, what efforts are there to link sustainable production with responsible consumption, both within the global value chains and within the domestic markets? Maybe you can share a little bit about that, Charles Opio. Do we have Charles on the call? Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you.
We can hear you.
I got a message that I'm not audible, but I was just asking if Charles Opio is on the call or not. Maybe we can go to someone else. Alice Kemunto. Alice, maybe as we try to get hold of Charles Opio, Alice Kemunto, you're on the call. That's Consumer Grassroots. Yes. How can the consumer ownership of sustainable food system be enhanced? And also, what, in terms of food challenges and opportunities, especially within Nairobi, how can we enhance this just to ensure that we are getting that ownership? Because I've seen a comment about consumers being flower girls. So how can we ensure that these are actually being enhanced in terms of the opportunities that are there?
Thank you, Nekesa. I just want to let the team know that I have network challenges, but in the event this happens, my colleague Angela is on call. I shall carry on. For those who are in this chat today, Consumer Grassroots Association has a membership of 150, close to 150,000 members in the country. And the network has helped us to gather information, especially on food safety. We are still on, and we still call on you to join us. Going straight to the point, first of all, before I respond to that, when I was called upon, or we were called upon to come and be part of this day's webinar, one thing we asked ourselves is, we know matters to do with food safety, but about quality, that one is something that we need to discuss about. And where are we in terms of food safety right now? We need to ask ourselves as a country, as members, as this group that are discussing here, where are we in terms of food safety? Do we have are we done any research on this? Do we have the numbers? Do we have the data that is guiding us on this? And who are the drivers of this whole conversation? Who are key drivers and who are being brought on board? And that's why I commented on the chat section that for the longest period that we have been in consumer protection, we have been treated as flaggers in the sense that we only come to decorate the conversation and the conversation ends there. We are not consulted anymore. But a time has come as consumer organizations and consumers are saying no to this, and they want to be we want to be the bride and the groom in the whole conversation. So when you're talking about what is the responsibility of a consumer, the basic thing that we need to understand is that we are all consumers. Even those who are producing, they are consumers. And if we get to a realization that we are consumers, then we go with that golden rule that do to others what you expect them to do to you. So if we agree that we are all consumers, then what are we supposed to do in order to go forward as a united team, but also something that is going to help us now and in the future? Don't forget that we are living on a borrowed environment, a borrowed soil, a borrowed ecosystem. And if we don't treat it right now, then it's going to be harsh on us. Borrowing the words of Wangare Maathai, it says that if you mistreat the environment, it will never forgive us. So what are we supposed to do as consumers then? Consumers are aware that they need safe food and sustainable food system. This is very key. Safe and sustainable food system. So how do we ensure that this happens? Consumers over the time know what they want, but what they lack is information. They lack information. They lack, whenever even government agencies have the data, it's not well communicated to consumers. And it reaches a point that consumers are left like orphans. And I want to take a case in point on regulators like KEBS. They have all the standard measures that are supposed to be carried on food system and the food value chain. So what happens? They are selling that, and not many consumers can afford to buy that booklet in order to know what they're supposed to get or what they're supposed to demand for from the source. So we are lacking information, and much of this information is not that it's not available. It's very well decorated at the shelves of the government agencies and ministries, but it's not reaching down to the consumer. This is one thing that we need to bear in mind, that if we are going forward, then you are here as a government agency, as organizations that have data, please make it available so that we can disseminate the same information to consumers right at the grassroots. And going forward, us as consumers, we want to own this conversation. We want to own this conversation fully. We want to be consulted at every level, because you as the producer, you as the retailer, you as the business person, you are all eyeing one orphan category of people, and those are consumers. And if these consumers don't have information, then they'll continue consuming food that is not safe. Let me talk about safety first. But at the same time, they are not sure that going forward, they will continue getting food in the market. So what do we need in order to be assisted or to be at a position to own this conversation? As I said before, one, we need information. Two, we need to carry out, as consumer organizations and the partners, we need to carry out what we call evidence-based advocacy. We want to go down and communicate to consumers about what they expect, the safe food that they expect to be produced, how it's supposed to be produced, like the one who talked about the safe markets and also the infrastructure that are supposed to be put in place. And once we tell the consumers this is what you are expecting from the actors, then they will demand for the same. And we also need to harmonize the laws and regulations on food safety and security. Actually, they are so fragmented, especially in the country. At times when you want to do what you call even traceability, which we are telling consumers to make sure they know what they're buying and where that food is coming from. They should ask hard questions. Where did you get this food from? How is it produced? Yes, it's a conversation that has started right now, but we hope that going forward, this conversation is going to be in every household. But we want the regulations to be harmonized so that in the event there's anything that we need to follow up, we can have a one-stop point when we want to find out matters to do with food safety and also the sustainability bit of it. So maybe going forward also, we want to partner with farmers, because if we get it right at production level, then we'll get it right at every other level. It will not be so difficult, because even if you have the best systems, the best transportation or storage facilities, if that food that has been produced is not safe, we say in consumer protection that if it's not safe, then it's not food. And that's what we believe in. And just finally, I just want to say that farmers are a key partner. Over the time, we've been treating them as them and us as consumers as us. But a time has come that we want to collaborate with farmers and also the other stakeholders, and especially to get it right on seed level. We want seed sovereignty to be a key factor in this agenda of the agenda that you are driving on food safety and quality. I think I'll leave it at that. If we get more time, I'll usher in my colleague Angela, and she will add into that if we have some more time. Thank you so much, Nekesa.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alice, for your comments. Maybe before you leave, I can give you maybe 2 minutes, or Angela, to just talk about the recent study that you did on the food safety. You can share some of the findings you had in 2 minutes, just to share that. Yeah.
Let Angela please come in and share the numbers.
Good morning to everybody. I'm actually very excited about this whole opportunity and this whole discussion we are having with regards to food safety. It's actually high time we keep the conversation going. And just to mention about the research we did on the food safety report, it was very evident that consumers are very worried about the food safety situation, as it should be. And a lot of concern, majorly the concerns that we received on food safety matters, it was led by use and misuse of pesticides. That was the highest concern when it comes to consumer awareness on food safety. We had issues on market sanitation, hygiene and sanitation in the markets. And these are matters that are actually quite evident even to us, to everybody in the value chain. So we had a number of ways that consumers believe they can aid in ensuring food safety for their own food, and that included like getting food from trusted suppliers. And we could see even supermarkets actually was the leading when it comes to the trusted suppliers, where consumers tend to feel that the food is quite safe when they're purchasing that for their own consumption. So that clearly tells us that there's a lot that needs to be done with regards to ensuring food safety. And just to weigh in on the discussion that we're having today, when we talk about, for example, standards, and it's clearly a code of practice that needs to be employed when it comes to food handling and in all value chain. But now when we look at the local, let me say local production or production of food for the local market, there is very little when it comes to implementation of food safety regulations that is actually employed. And there are many reasons. And one of the things that is very, very concerning is we can be able to produce very good quality food for the export market. But most of the times that you get the foods that are rejected, for example, with cases of high MRLs, are actually directed to the local market. What does that even say for us as a country? It clearly says that we do not have concern for our well-being. And that is something that really needs to change. We can actually be able, the same quality that we are able to export is the same quality of food that we need for our own consumption. So on standards and laws and policies, we have a lot of regulation on that. And when you try to even research about it, there are very many policies initiated by the government, many policies that are within the county levels, but on matters implementation, I can see we can all agree that implementation is the problem, but how can we be able to ensure success in implementation of these regulations and policies? And we can, for example, on starting with the KS 1758, this is a standard that is actually rolled out for the kitchen. It's a Kenyan standard, and it's supposed to actually benefit everybody. But how can we be able to access all this information? Because as a consumer, as a producer, as a propagator, it's important for everybody to have this information. So that means it's supposed to be accessible to everybody. Let us look at
Angela,
everybody at any point. Yes.
So Angela,
Sorry?
I will first of all give a chance to Charles because he's back online. Then we can get back to you on the case 1758. So Charles Opio works for GAIN as the head of policy. And from your studies that you've conducted showcasing the efforts to link sustainable production, could you please just share your experience, especially when it comes to that link between the sustainable production and responsible consumption, especially when you're looking at the global value chains and within also the domestic markets? Charles Opio.
Yeah, thank you very much. As you've heard, I'm Charles Opio. Glad to have joined again. I said I work for GAIN. Basically working a lot more, especially as I've mentioned, with a lot of private sector conversations around, mainstreaming issues of nutrition, even within the food systems discourse. Really, there must be to rethink our food systems. And I'm glad that at the beginning we had mentioned that our food system is a bit more broken. And therefore, we really have to really look at what we call the farm to fork sort of approach to addressing the challenges that we face within the entire continuum of food production, all through from farm gate to transportation to particular system. And as GAIN, I think one thing we've really been very keen on is to really create a more sustainable partner that really would ensure that we kind of address, especially the triple challenges, to looking at which this area, that's part of what we are working on, even in the UN food discussion, is around nutritious food for all. And of course, that means that if we are to talk about issues to do with hunger, then we understand that really there is a big deficit, of course, at global level, coming to the Kenya level, because we must understand that one thing that is very clear is that close to 70% of arable land globally, I think that scientifically has been proven to be really degraded. And that means that then there is a big impact in terms of the production levels. Same thing to Kenya, even as we all understand, basically, even looking at the situation, as we speak, we already have a deficit, even in terms of our staple food production, which is almost 10-20%. And with that, you can imagine that if we are only around 46 to close to around 49 million Kenyans, then in the next 10 years or so, by 2030, the projections are making it very clear that we are likely to hit about 64 million, sort of 64 million Kenyans. And then that means that if you already have we are experiencing the deficit in terms of our production, then it then calls all the stakeholders within the entire food systems space to really think well in advance. And of course, as you've heard, this is the UN Decade of Action, and trying to rethink and building back better even from the impact of COVID is to really think forward and say, yes, by the next 10 years, would it be really possible for all the stakeholders to really think in the way we produce, consume, and even think about food? Because we are all told very well that I think that food is at the root cause of most of the challenges that are currently being faced, even in terms of the burden of the disease. and of course, even in terms of, just the hunger that really being faced across many countries, including Kenya. So that then means that really, therefore, we have to really bring on board each and every player within this particular space. And I'm happy that the conversations that have been ongoing within the UN food systems discussions, especially within the dialogues that have been held both in Kenya and a couple of countries, you'd already feel that this was the only chance that all people were given opportunity to really express their ideas, looking at young people, youth who are in agriculture, looking at women and the food systems. And of course, obvious reasons, we know very well that for instance, even women actually have really been left out when it comes to factors of production, in as much as they play a critical role even in the labor force and all these. So looking at the statistics, and of course, as I've mentioned, that different groups have in the past not been very much included in the whole discussions around food systems. And therefore, I think this is the only opportunity that we're having, even as a country or as the global community, to really rethink and really ensure that everybody else that is supposed to be in this particular discourse is brought on board. And that would not really transcend to issues to do with researchers, looking at people who are doing issues in terms of even insurance, financing for food systems, looking at smallholder farmers, looking at technology kind of experts, and everyone else, to really ensure that then we come up with very clear but very robust ways in which we are going to enhance production for
Charles,
problem that is also
yes, okay.
Yes?
I think we lost you for a few seconds, so maybe it was my
sorry.
connection. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now you're very clear. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we can.
Is a great opportunity, especially the food systems actors like ourselves, to really think inclusive as possible, to be very deliberate, to really position to know new status quo. I mean, therefore, that we really must be very deliberate in terms of now charting the way in which the next 10 years or so, or maybe as we even look at the end of SDGs, we hope brought on board in this particular. I wanted to also mention is the issue of urbanization that is increasingly coming up. And then that means that if we are going to have a lot of populations living in the urban centers of their requirements, behaviors, people now, the discussion is about, eating healthy, eating, more diverse kind of food diets and all these kind of things, then it means then we really must think out of the box. And that is why to us, the discussions such as these have been very important, because then we are thinking, yes, it's one thing to really come up with policies, another thing coming up with strategies, it's another thing to really just develop a very different ballgame to be able to really have very practical ways in which we can increase our production volumes. So we are hoping that with this kind of engagement, we've really been able to really therefore ensure that we don't leave anyone in this particular discourse. To issues on food safety, and as I mentioned this very clearly, now with the urban food systems being now
I think we lost him.
We are losing you, Charles. I don't know if it's possible to get to, because you're really giving us very important, these are very important discussion and very important points you're giving us. Is it possible to get to a point where we can have good connection? Then we can have you back on the call. Okay, so as is getting good network, maybe it's something we can, we have a few minutes to welcome our CEO for Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors, and maybe just to give one more opportunity to Lydia in less than a minute. Hello,
Charles Opio,
Yes,
are you
sorry,
back?
I think I was on mute.
Okay, yeah, please, I'll give you 1 more minute to finish and probably we can then, yeah. Please go ahead, yes.
It's about food which is not, and so the populations which are growing, and also the diverse needs of these various populations. And that means, therefore, we have to really think very critically in terms of how we will be able to address food systems. I mean, I'm on the food safety issues. One of the things that I know we have done, and we are thinking very much, is how do we work with our open markets? We get out from the informal markets, and therefore we could really think through even that Mama Mboga who is down there. Do we have measures to be able to really sensitize them, just let them understand on how they can be able to really manage and handle food very effectively, and at the same time also help them also extend the shelf life and all that. And therefore the ideas such as the cold room systems in our open market are a bit more in terms of even ensuring that the proper waste management and losses management, these are new things that I think we really must be able to embrace, and especially even as we plug it into what we call now the clean energy, where we don't have to really get an electricity source maybe from the main grid. We can easily set up some of these of energy systems within our markets and ensure that our cold system, we ensure that the foods are safe, but at the same time also extending the shelf life and all that. So I think those are some of the things that, and I also wanted to mention something very important, that for us to really be able to get a good of support from our food systems players, let's really work coordination sort of structures, and this is what GAIN has done in Nakuru, Mombasa, and Kiambu, where we bring in together the different industry players, like if these are millers who are supposed to be looking at issues on aflatoxins, we bring them together with KEBS, CAM, looking at farmer groups, and anyone else to ensure that at least the conversation is not us versus them, but more or less really understanding that it's the responsibility of all of us to ensure that the food that we sell, or rather maybe consume, is safe for consumption. So those are the kind of what I would call game-changing approaches that can help transform the way we engage, as opposed to the normal way in which we kind of police and kind of ensure compliance. I think in that regard, you'll be able to get a lot of support to transform the food system. So that's basically my submission.
Yeah.
I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Charles. Now I'll have to give each of the presenters 1 minute, and we will be very strict. If you do not you cannot summarize in 1 minute, I'll cut you short because we have very few minutes to wind up. So I'll give each one of you 1 minute to just tell us. We've had very good discussions, and there are a lot of questions that are coming up in terms of how do we move forward? Yes, there's questions about putting in place market infrastructure. Joshua, maybe you can let us know who is responsible for this market infrastructure and how long will it take to put together this infrastructure? When we are talking about sustainable finance, what do you mean about sustainable finance? Who will put to task these people who are actually presenting themselves to get this sustainable finance? Who will actually follow up to know that they're actually implementing this? So there's a lot of questions that are coming up out of your presentations and out of the discussion. So we would like to know, what is the way forward? And I'll start with you, Mr. Joshua Oliali.
Yes,
just 1 minute.
Yes. I think issues about market, of course, it's a county activity, but we want to work with the county government and financial institutions and development partners willing to try and mobilize the traders. I said the first thing, you start by mobilizing them. You training them, because some of them, it's not the issue about money. They can still be able to improve their structures when they know how profitable it is for them to sell food in a good environment. And then the ones that cannot be able to access money, they should be linked with a financial institution. We are aware that Equity Bank has a lot of money for MSMEs. And this, for us, we say these are the SMEs that we want to promote. So we'll be working with the Ministry of Trade to train and also link them to financial institution together with the county government. That's it.
Thank you so much. And I think this presents the next question and probably the how. Ms. Agatha Tuo, I don't know if we still have you on the call. We've just heard that there's a lot of money for MSMEs. What are we doing about this to ensure that our food markets or our food systems are actually up to that level? Ms. Agatha? Do we still have Ms. Agatha on the call? If not, we can go to Ms. Wambui Mbarire, your punch word for the day, the how.
Work together. That is one. Government, private sector, all stakeholders in the sector. Let's each play our role. Just coming out of the trainings we've done, one of the things we realize is that farmers do know the right thing to do. So it is just to enforce the importance of doing the right thing and to call on government to be more effective in the implementation and enforcing, and then to speak to everyone as a consumer, demand, and that way the supply chain will work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Alice Kemunto or Angela, 1 minute. Angela, are you still on call?
Yes, I am. One of the most important things that I feel in this platform, we should all have access to information, and as a consumer, the KS 1758 should be made available to anybody, because this is something that concerns everybody. So accessibility to that information will empower a consumer to know what they need to know when it comes to food standards, and they will understand, why do we need to have these standards? What does it mean when it comes to production, it comes to propagation, value addition? Once they have that information, then they will get that power to be able to demand what they already know. I think that's my parting shot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Charles, 1 minute.
Nekesa, can I just add something? This is Wambui. The question of availability keeps coming back. So one of the things we've done is we've done a portal for Horticulture Crop Directorate on which they're hosting all information in regard to 1758. So the task is to disseminate it further for those who don't have access to the portal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wambui, for that information. Charles Opio, we need to know the how going forward. What do we need to do in 1 minute? If not, I'll give Lydia the opportunity. And the reason why I wanted her to be the last person is because there's something called the Green Climate Fund. And Lydia, I'll give you 2 minutes, because this Green Climate Fund seems to be very promising for sustainable agricultural development and food security. But agriculture is not one of the specific focus for the Paris Agreement, nor is it even earmarked under the GCF. How would these types of funds be used to adapt to agriculture in Kenya? So as you respond to that final question, you also give us your way forward in less than 2 minutes. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nekesa. Maybe to start off is to correct. And yes, agriculture has actually been prioritized in the Paris Agreement. We have a session that is referred to as the Coronivia Joint Work in Agriculture. So the Paris Agreement is cognizant of the very critical role that food systems play in terms of climate change. So we have, and that is under which the climate smart agriculture, the climate change unit in the Ministry of Agriculture, that is where they report with regards to issues of the Paris Agreement. So the Green Climate Fund is a financing mechanism of the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework on Climate Change Convention. So it has been made available by that convention to support especially developing countries to build resilience against climate change. So it has 2 tracks. It has mitigation, that is the reduction of emissions, and also adaptation, which is to support recovery efforts against climate change vulnerability. So we find that under our climate smart agriculture, it has acknowledged that agriculture sector is one of the heaviest emitters. So through this, we can pipeline support and financing for agriculture in its entirety, and especially to address the issues of food safety. So under the Green Climate Fund, you just need to specifically highlight whether what you're doing is under mitigation. Are you reducing emissions? So I will use KS 1758. When KS 1758 promotes the use of organic matter, that reduces the carbon dioxide that is being emitted into the atmosphere. So that falls under mitigation in terms of seeking financing under Green Climate Fund. When it promotes energy efficiency, which is very core to the environment conservation pillar of 1758, water use efficiency, good agricultural practices, then that builds resilience and adaptation. So that also qualifies. So given the conversation that we are having today, we realize and appreciate there is quite a bit of investment that is required for the government in terms of, for example, one of the lessons that was coming from the KS 1758 pilot rollout is the need for more accreditation services at a devolved level. So you realize that even development partners have acknowledged this, that while they're willing to support aspects of food safety, some investments can be very critical. And then given the constraints we are facing presently as a country, in terms of financing, we may not be able to, at the moment, do that. But through the Green Climate Fund, then this is something that can be inputted as one of the areas of support. Then for the private sector investment, the fund also captures support aspects of capacity building, which have kept recurring, sensitization, which have also kept recurring throughout this conversation. And then also it addresses aspects of investment. So you realize that, for example, supermarkets, the wet markets, we may need to have investments in terms of infrastructure to assure food safety and quality going forward. So the Green Climate Fund also makes it possible to have this particular facility. The best thing is that Kenya is one of the best scoring countries in terms of access to the Green Climate Fund, which is facilitated by the National Treasury. They have over 10 projects that have been financed, and they are in the threshold of $1 billion plus Kenya shillings. So with this kind of resources at our disposal, we realize that, just like it has been said, that we need to work together. We are able to submit a proposal that comprehensively covers all the stakeholders that have participated in this particular forum to actually ensure that standards and food safety is assured with regard to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. On to my closing remarks, going forward, I'd like to, my proposal would be that we need to start seriously looking into accessing sustainable finance, and also now appreciating aspects like doing climate-related financial disclosures for the agriculture sector. And secondly, as we adopt the standards even to ensure access to green trade opportunities, we need to ensure that the process is inclusive.
Thank you so much, Lydia. And
because adoption of standards tends to leave out women who are. And then finally, we need innovative business models that make adoption of standards easy, but also affordable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lydia. And as usual, you only still a few minutes, but you're excused for today. So I would like to welcome Miss Jen Musindi, who is a horticulturist and a business development practitioner. She's involved in policy advocacy in the Kenyan agricultural industry to improve business environment, especially for smallholder farmers and agriculture MSMEs. She's an advocate for private sector industry, self-regulation, and is involved in efforts that promote food safety systems in the Kenya domestic market. She's also the current CEO for the Society of Crop Business Advisor, and also represents in the board, in the council for the Agricultural Sector Network, that's ASNET. So welcome, Ms. Jen Musindi, and the floor is yours to close the session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nekesa. That was a mouthful to listen to. Thank you, everyone, for honoring our invite. As I can see, the conversation continues. This is not the only conversation we shall have on the food safety, because the UN Food System Summit, the large summit is in September. So this conversation will carry on until when we can collect all the views from all stakeholders. And, it serves to give a lot of information to people who need, to decision makers who need to make a difference to all our lives. this conversation was supposed to identify gaps and maybe give us some information on how to address these gaps. And the two biggest ones I have personally seen is that one, according to government, our focus has been on smallholders in groups, and there's only 10% of those ones. So we need to actually really reevaluate our thoughts. And the second one is empowering the consumer, because even if we require the consumer to drive the food safety conversation, they need to be, their awareness needs to be strengthened so they know what to ask for and how they expect this to be delivered. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. Thank you for gracing us. We have collected a lot of views, and I'm sure all of us have learned something from the conversations that have been going on. Let us continue talking. And with that, I wish to close this meeting. It is now 12 o'clock. So thank you all and have a good day.